Injuries, unfortunately, remain a massive part of fantasy football. More specifically, adjusting better than our opponents to injuries, to me, is one of the bigger edges that we will find. To discuss this season's injuries, I am joined by an old friend of the show, an actual physical therapist, one of each August's most anticipated guests. It is Stephania Bell, senior writer, injury analyst at ESPN, one of the co-hosts on Fantasy Focus Football Podcast and the Fantasy Football Now Sunday morning show during the season. Stephania, really appreciate the time. How's it going today?
It's going well. We're getting close, aren't we? It's almost that time of year. I describe it to everyone as once you get on, it's like the runaway train, and you can't get off until sometime in February. But
Yes.
much anticipated, but then a little bit terrifying. And then once I'm going, it feels much better. But thanks for the intro. It's always a pleasure to join the show. I'm a big fan.
Yes, I appreciate that. And I know that it's time for the season to start because I was doing a draft and I saw Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt go at 67 overall. And that is how I know that it is indeed time for the season to start. On today's show, we are going to discuss 8 of the most important injury storylines heading into the fantasy football season. We'll hit on short-term outlook, long-term outlook, and anything else notable. Reminder that all of our rankings bake in every injury, small or large. If you have a draft coming up, I unbiasedly, of course, think you'd be insane not to show up with our draft kit. Check it out at establishthерun.com. Again, on the injury stuff, a lot of stuff is probabilities and guessing at different outcomes. We're trying to weigh all that by both base case and ceiling outcome, which flows through to the rankings you can find in the draft kit. All right, Stephania, I want to start with Christian McCaffrey, one of the biggest injury stories of last season. The injuries that he dealt with, the main injury he dealt with last year that kept him out at the beginning at least, was bilateral Achilles tendonitis. The reports this year at a 49ers camp have been outstanding. Looks like himself has been at practice almost every day. Every other 49ers running back is hurt. Christian McCaffrey's been the one that hasn't been hurt, and he's been the one out there. The question to me isn't, is he going to be out there week 1? It's what percent of the former Christian McCaffrey, who was so outrageously dominant, do we think he is off this injury? Maybe it's no big deal. Maybe he's back to 100%. I don't know. What do you think about this bilateral Achilles tendonitis stuff around Christian McCaffrey?
So interesting, because I think ever since last season ended, he has been the most anticipated player to talk about coming into 2025, and probably the most difficult player to fully analyze because as I described this when we were doing the fantasy football marathon, you can look at it as glass half empty or glass half full and kind of make your case. You know how they say stats can be used however you want them? You can sort of manipulate your argument based on stats. I feel like we're a little bit there with Christian McCaffrey. I will just start by saying that I'm very high on him this season. Doesn't mean I'm right. I've been wrong before. But I feel very good about where he is for a few reasons. Let's go back to last year when this started. And I think when you had me on last year, I was feeling pretty good about Christian McCaffrey. Everybody was. I mean, what's the big deal? He had a mild calf strain, as Shanahan reported at the beginning of the season. They called it Achilles tendonitis. And you could see that those things, the calf is attached to the Achilles. So sometimes they just label something differently. Sometimes it's an evolution of the problem. But either way, all we heard was he's rehabbing, and the goal was to have him ready by week 1. So we really didn't know any different. We did know that he went overseas to get some treatment because we saw that he went to Germany. He didn't say much about that. And then it was Monday Night Football. And we had spent all Sunday morning, the first week 1, saying, not to worry, Christian McCaffrey, he's ready to go. Everything looks good. And then he was a scratch right before the game, threw everyone into a complete scramble and probably ruined the fantasy football season for a lot of folks who drafted him first overall. Obviously, that isn't the way that McCaffrey or the 49ers wanted things to go, but he ended up having to miss the first 8 games of the season. And then he finally comes back. And everyone's thinking, great, we finally have him back. But he didn't really look like himself the first couple games. This is not surprising. I mean, when you're down for essentially 3 months before you come back, it's going to take a bit to ramp up and get acclimated. I don't care how talented you are. You have to get back into the business of playing football. And we finally saw him looking like himself. And this is important because this is what brings you into this season. It was, I can't remember, so I don't have all my notes in front of me, week 13 or week 14, whatever it was against the Bills. And it was that snow globe game. You remember everybody was slip sliding around, and McCaffrey was running as well as we had seen in 2024. Really looked like his old self. But then he gets tripped up and he lands on his shin and tears his PCL, which, by the way, that's a common way that happens. And then that was the end of the season. So we never really got to see him for an extended look once he was back to being himself. But it was important to me that we saw him look like his former self before we lost him for the rest of the year. The time off was plenty for the PCL recovery. And the question became, what do we make of this Achilles tendonitis coming into this year? Now that we know he's been in the league for a number of seasons. He's got a lot of tread, worn off those tires, but he's also a guy who trains meticulously. He's a guy who will have a chip on his shoulder about what happened last year, and who's going to look at everything that led to that and examine what can I do differently to make sure this does not happen again. If there is any player I trust to integrate everything into his preparation for this season to make sure that his body holds up differently, it's him. So I don't carry the same weight in terms of how many years he's been in the league or how much use he's gotten as a running back, because he's an X factor. He's a unicorn in this way. His training is different. If you watch videos of how he trains, a lot of track workouts incorporated into it, a lot of the way he does these dynamic movements that are designed to allow him to take contact in a way that most players don't do. All of that little stuff, it does matter. So when I was talking about glass half empty, glass half full, he missed a lot of games last season. He only played in 3 and part of a 4th when he got the PCL injury. You could say, look, he only played in 4 games last season. Or you could say, he only played in 4 games last season. And that means fresher legs, less abuse on the body. I feel better about him coming into this year. So the fact that he came into OTAs unrestricted, the fact that he has been just on point for every single practice, and there are no wasted steps, by the way. I was at 49ers camp, and so I saw him. He looks great. There's nothing else to say. You see him in the offense. He knows this offense like back of his hand. He and Brock Purdy, it's like, all the communication is fantastic. When practice is over and Christian McCaffrey is leaving the field, he's on a scooter. There are no extra steps taken. Like, he is on an electric scooter going by. So everything is planned out to the T. And I think that even though you have to consider there's risk, it'd be naive to say there's zero risk. I think despite the presentation he has coming into this season, the reward so much outweighs the risk that I'm willing to go there.
Yeah. So if you listen to Man vs. Machine, anyone out there, Leone talked about how we've been as conservative as we possibly can on inputs to the model for Christian McCaffrey to bake in whatever risk we could, right? In terms of efficiency, in terms of workload, everything. And he's still, despite us being as conservative as possibly can, because he's such an outrageous fantasy player, we still have him 6th overall in fantasy. And if he sustains health and is what he was before, I'm pretty confident he's going to finish as the number 1 fantasy player. It's just like the way he scores is so outrageous.
Yeah, and if you think about his utilization within this offense, first of all, he's a huge pass catcher. Most people are playing in PPR leagues of some format. So the volume, I think Mike Clay on our site has him projected for 72 receptions this year. Yeah. That's insane for a running back, but that speaks to the volume that he is likely to get. Not only within the game does he touch the ball a number of times, it's the amount of snaps that he plays. He's trusted out there. We all know that being on the field gives you more opportunity, even if it's not a design play for you. So it's just hard to really push him down, because the possibility exists that he could end the season as the number 1 player of fantasy.
The only other thing that I would say is that the first round this year is so loaded. If you did not want to take on any risk, and it sounds like Stephania thinks the risk is not that high, but if you did not want to take on the risk, you can take Justin Jefferson, you can take Amon-Ra, you can take Nico, you can take Gibbs, you can take, you know what I mean? You can take all kinds of, I know there's some injuries with those guys as well. I know.
And that's the thing is, like, and there's hardly any other players where I would say, Achilles tendonitis, which is it does worry you more because that's sort of a chronic thing, right?
Right.
And you're talking about tendon changes, which come with age, which come with wear and tear, etc. But we also know that there are ways of loading tendon. We don't want to get into the weeds with the science, but we know that when there's tendinopathy present, tendonitis, tendinopathy down that continuum, there are ways of training to help adapt that tendon. It doesn't have to be the 20-year-old tendon that it once was. There are ways to adapt and actually avoid having another flare up. So, if there's anybody who's going to do it, I just believe that it's him.
Okay. Let's go to injury storyline number 2, which is Chris Godwin dislocated ankle. I'm curious if you think this timeline is as strange as I do. Last year, after the dislocated ankle, it happens, it sucks, everybody's devastated. They come out, Jason Licht comes out and says, Godwin might be back for the playoffs if we can make it. They do make the playoffs. He doesn't come back. Okay, whatever. No big deal. That was a pipe dream. Then they give him this big contract, $44 million guaranteed. I'm like, oh, Godwin's fine. Then it starts coming out. He had another surgery. Then it comes out he's not going to practice in camp that much, and he hasn't practiced yet. Now it comes out a lot of speculation that he might start the season on the PUP list, which would mean he'd miss the first 4 games. So in my mind now, this has gotten worse since the injury originally happened, and since the Bucs gave him the money. In my mind, something has happened that has gotten worse. Do you see it the same way with this really strange timeline on Chris Godwin?
Not really. I see it as this was always the potential for it to go this way because of the nature of the injury. Ankle fracture dislocations do not get the credit that they deserve for how nasty the injury is. Because I think people hear, well, fracture, broken bones, they heal, dislocation, okay. And maybe because people think of like the shoulder, it can pop out, it can pop back in, like it's back, no big deal. Well, when you have a dislocation of any joint, really, but particularly the violence with which an injury like Godwin's happened, you have to think of the energy that goes through that joint, which is also enough to break the bone. So the broken bone is one thing, the broken fibula. You have your own issues with that healing, depending on the nature of the break. But it's you can struggle with healing of the bone itself. That's one thing. The dislocation, not only do you have soft tissue trauma because the joint is displaced. Think of your ankle now facing the wrong way, right? A lot of things have to tear for that to happen most of the time. The degree to which it happens varies based on the individuals, but the bottom line is you can have soft tissue injuries, you can have blood vessel damage, you can have cartilage damage. That to me is one of the most significant things that doesn't get talked about, because even if you put all the things back and the bone heals and the soft tissue repairs itself and scars down, what the inside of that joint looks like, that's the part we don't know. And when you have cartilage damage, cartilage doesn't regrow. And what does that mean? It means the surface of the bones that's covered by cartilage is what protects the surface of the bones. If you have damage there that doesn't repair itself, you can end up with arthritic changes. That's what arthritis is. It's break down the cartilage. So you've got a weight-bearing joint, and if you have cartilage damage, you don't know exactly how that joint's going to function, how it's going to behave, how it's going to respond to stress. So there's a lot of uncertainty around that injury to begin with. That's going back to when it happened. When I saw that the Buccaneers drafted Emeka Egbuka in the first round, that sent off little bells to me that Chris Godwin's not necessarily where we've heard that he is. Doesn't mean that he can't still have a good outcome. It was April, but it meant that there was at least some uncertainty to me about his status. We'll come to find out he in fact had a second surgery. So now we know why that uncertainty existed. And I think as far as the signing, you'd have to speak to the front office people about where they got their confidence from. But they were doing it based on, what they expected the end result to be, I would suspect, as opposed to like week 1 of the season. It's a 3-year deal, as you pointed out, all this guaranteed money. He's beloved in that community. They wanted him there. It's interesting because I also think, the Patriots were the running for him, right?
Yep.
And the Patriots were offering more money.
Yep.
And he took a hometown discount. All of a sudden makes me think, was there a question that Patriots might, upon a physical, they might not deliver that. So if you think about how the player fits in the organization, they want him there for the long haul. Would it matter if he was ready for week one? Probably not. And what matters more is that they get him for the bulk of that contract. So if you look at it in that perspective, if I'm the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I would want to get him back when he is ready to play and is as healthy as possible coming into it, as opposed to getting him back early for week one and running the risk of it not going well. And then you have problem after problem after problem.
Yeah.
And so the best way to do that is to have somebody else who can fill in. And by all accounts, Ibuka looks great in the preseason. They're very happy with him. And you allow Godwin to get back into football activity as he's able. Think about it. Even if he didn't start on the pup list, he hasn't practiced yet. So what kind of volume would he be getting if he were to just come off and be activated to go into a game?
Yeah.
It's not really fair to him. And I think in the interest of the long haul, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a multi-week absence. Maybe he'll beat that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was multiple weeks so he has a chance to ramp up before he gets fully involved.
Yeah, it's just a scary click for me. And the ADP has reflected this. You know, you can get him now at 105, 110, something like that. Obviously, if you're in a redraft league with an IR spot, I think Godwin has a little bit more value than he would normally. It's just a scary click for me because it feels like, at least to me, Stephania sounds a little bit different, but we've had surprises, like we've had surprises along the way. I don't know that I can face more surprises, but at pick 110 or 115, you're building in a lot of that downside risk there already on Godwin. So it's starting to get to a point in price where I think it's starting to be more okay.
I understand, like from the outside looking in, it's like, oh, wow, this really got worse. Whereas to me, it's like, well, maybe there was a little optimism on the front office side early.
Yeah.
That's now been tempered. And now the positioning for them has got to be, what do we do to give him the best chance of success going forward? And maybe that means, but that sounds to me like he's chomping at the bit to get back, wants to get back in there. And that's just the kind of player he is. I think it speaks to him. We know he came back well from his ACL, MCL before, but you also have to think of that 3-year picture when you're bringing him back.
All right. Let's go to another wide receiver injury. Brandon Aiyuk tore his ACL, MCL, hamstring, had meniscus damage, really, really, really bad injury. So I don't think anyone's surprised with the rhetoric out of San Francisco right now, which is, yeah, we'll start looking at him sometime around week 5, week 6. Maybe he'll be back then. Maybe he'll be back in week 10. We don't really know. I think people underestimate how serious his injury is. So not a surprise that he's going to be on PUP. Not a surprise that he might not be back until week 6, 8, 10. I think the question that people have now, Stephania, is when Aiyuk does come back, is this injury so serious he'll never be himself again? What do you think the chances are of Brandon Aiyuk returning to that 2023 form that was so impressive?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a fair question. And the answer, if anybody told you they knew for sure, they'd be lying, because I don't think anyone knows for sure. I mean, consider the fact that when I was out at training camp, he was just, out there hanging out with the wide receiver group, kind of coaching up some of the guys, but really still very much in rehab mode and clearly not practicing. We've seen guys come back from ACL injuries, and when you take isolated ACL injuries, we know that they often have a drop in their performance metrics the first year. It's not until the second year they start returning to that pre-injury level of performance. That's for a clean ACL. You add in all the things that you mentioned. It's a complex knee injury. The recovery is longer. It takes longer to get the confidence back in the knee. I also look at how he went down. It was a really ugly hit. Guys can be as tough as they want until they're out at game speed and other people are coming for them, who are not thinking about, don't want to hit your knee because I know you're still getting used to being back out here. There's apprehension, whether you want to believe that or not.
Sure.
And people are different in terms of how they react to it, but it might make a guy cut a route a little bit shorter, or not go for the extra yards after the catch, or not go for a catch that's physically contested as much. It changes the nature of how they behave on the field, especially initially. So I would say, I've kind of wait and see on Brandon Aiyuk this season. Look, everybody knows I'm an unapologetic 49ers fan. I want him to be great again, but I want him to be great again as a receiver, and I'm not sure that happens this year.
Yeah. Been a really tough click. I would almost have to have an IR spot on my roster to take Brandon Aiyuk here at this point. Speaking of wide receivers with knee injuries, let's go to story number 4, which is Stephon Diggs. I can't believe this. I mean, I feel like when I first started doing this, ACL, you might be done for your career, but at the soonest, you'll be back in 12 months. Now we got guys 31 years old tearing their ACL, partying on a boat all summer, and then coming back.
That is not part of the rehab plan, by the
And
way.
it's part of my rehab plan and Stephon's, and still hasn't missed practice. Everybody misses practice. Stephon Diggs has not missed a single Patriots training camp practice. Every veteran sits out practice, it seems like. Stephon Diggs has not missed a single one. So at this point, we're treating Diggs as if he's almost 100%, despite being 31 off an ACL tear. This is not a bet that I normally like to make, Stephania. How comfortable are you with the bet on Diggs 31 coming off an ACL tear?
Not totally, because you can't replicate the game conditions. Everything I just said for Brandon Aiyuk, that applies to Stephon Diggs as well. Now, the difference is he had a clean ACL tear, and it happened a little bit earlier. So additional recovery time. I mean, all those things matter. 1 month in the scope of recovering from an injury like this is a huge difference. So his timeline was more favorable for him in that regard. And the fact, again, that it was an isolated ACL, also more favorable for him. Not as many restrictions, a little bit easier to recover from. Still a significant injury. I don't want to, take away from what he had to do to get back. But I'm very curious to see what he does in New England. We used to think of Stephon Diggs, he could be a deep threat, right? Speed down the field. We haven't seen that. And I don't know what we will see in that regard. But can he be a high volume receiver for Drake May in that offense? I think so. And so for fantasy purposes, he may still provide a ton of value, even if he's not exactly the same guy he was before the injury. To your point, I think it's impressive that he hasn't missed any time. That's a good indicator that he's not having a lot of issues with swelling or discomfort as he stresses the knee during practice. But in terms of performance, until we see it in a game, we don't really know what that looks like. Well, nobody's coming after his knee in practice, by the way.
Right. And you get the compounding decline, right? Not only is he on the later part of his career, and data is very clear about age cliffs at wide receiver, but you also get him coming off the ACL tear. But again, price somewhat reflects that. Like, you can still get him. I prefer him around 80. He's been going closer to 70 lately, but yeah, he's still in the mix there.
And he did look good in Houston until it happened. Like he was having a little bit of a resurgence there, I think.
I mean, these clean ACL tears, like I didn't have Christian Watson on the list. I don't think it's that important, but Christian Watson also had a clean ACL tear, and there is video out there of him running freely, cutting, everything like that. And so we're starting to think Christian Watson could be back late this year and kind of throw a wrench in the plans at the outside there for Romeo Doubs or Matthew Golden. So the clean ACL tear seems like guys are just brushing off at a faster and faster clip.
For the most part, yes. I mean, I think this is where I like to remind people why the injury analysis hopefully is valuable, because it's the job of people like me to go, yeah, but Christian Watson had chronic hamstring injuries before. And the number one complication when guys return from, I say guys because we're talking football, but when anyone returns to sport following an ACL reconstruction, secondary compensatory injury most likely is a hamstring injury. Now, Watson had done a lot of work. This is why I felt terrible for him when he had that tear. He had done so much work. He'd gone to consult with specialists up at University of Wisconsin-Madison, where they're doing research with that NFL grant on hamstring injury and recovery. And it looked like he had really changed things for himself. So I'm assuming that a lot of things he learned have been integrated into his rehab process, but it does make it a little trickier to evaluate his post-ACL recovery prognosis versus someone who didn't have that prior history.
100%. All right, let's go to story number 5. It is Isiah Pacheco, and people might be saying, Isiah Pacheco's not hurt. What are you talking about, Adam? My question for Stephania is the fractured fibula thing. We've seen this happen with Cooper Kupp, with Tony Pollard. Their first year back, it seems like they really struggle, and then they somewhat get back, at least in Tony Pollard's case, did get back to, I thought, playing really well last season. Do you think And I did not think Isiah Pacheco was good last year when he got back, like
Listen,
at all. Do you think Isiah Pacheco is fully over this now? Thoughts on him now? Another 6 months removed from the fractured fibula.
yes, I think what people have to remember is that he tried to come back in season from that injury. And if you say, well, why do it if you don't look like you're yourself? Well, when your team's making a Super Bowl run, that's why you do it. Because medically, you're stable enough. The fracture had healed. He was to the point where they're like, okay, we can allow you to contribute because come on, we don't know. I know it's the Chiefs. I know it feels like they go to the Super Bowl all the time, but you never know when you get to go again. And here's a guy who's a contributor to the team, and maybe he can be helpful in that championship run. He wasn't running like pre-injury Pacheco, but he at least got to get on the field. And we should be thankful because we at least got to see that he was back. We didn't lose him early in the year last year and then not see him again until this fall to have any sense that he could be back. Not to mention the confidence boost for him. I always talk about this. You get back into game situation. There is a mental aspect to like, okay, I know I've been out there on the field since this injury. I'm good. Over that additional recovery time in the off season, more chance to get mobility back, more chance to get strength in the leg and the core and all the things around it. Even the little tiny bits we've seen in the preseason, I think are enough to tell me that you're going to see a different looking Isiah Pacheco this year than you did when last season ended. And I think people might be sleeping on him.
Yeah, it's tough. I do think that Kareem Hunt is going to play in some short yardage stuff. They also have Eli Mitchell there, who I think can play when he's healthy. I haven't heard great things about Brashard Smith. He's in the mix there as well. Like they have a lot of bodies, but if Pacheco is there, I think they want him to be their
Right.
lead runner if he is there and healthy for sure. All right. Let's go to story 6, which is these camp foot injuries to Kenneth
Yes.
Walker and Jayden Reed. I think what people have in their head about Kenneth Walker is he's 24 years old. Maybe he's not actually hurt, but just being on a maintenance plan when you're 24 years old is like a red flag. Do you find Kenneth Walker sitting out practices due to this foot maintenance as a red flag on him, even though he comes back, he participates in practice, he seems like he's fine. Oh, we're going to ease off here. We're going to give him a couple of days off. Oh, now he's back. Is that a concern to you at all on the Kenneth Walker foot stuff?
I think it's just they're taking the long view, right? Season's long, and you don't have much recovery time week to week once you're actually in the real season. So now it's a combination. This is the dance that all teams have to do if something crops up during training camp. Things that might not cause a player to miss time suddenly cause them to miss a couple of weeks. We get nervous because we're not seeing the player, but the team is like, I don't need to be putting him out there running him to death when we know when we really need him is as the season unfolds. That being said, he's had a couple of lower extremity injuries in the past. You don't like to see a foot
Yeah.
injury early in camp, even if it's minor. Is that something that's going to be a problem again? We don't know the nature of it. So is it soreness because he got, you know, stepped on or his shoe is too tight? Or is it soreness like he's got a problem in his plantar fascia and this is going to blow up
Right.
during the season? We don't know.
Right.
So I think it's hard to assess just how much the risk is without having a little more detail on the injury. I think what's interesting though is Zach Charbonnet starts taking more reps. You've got some different people in the coaching staff taking a look at this, and does that shift how the workload
Yeah.
balance plays out there? Those are the kind of things that, for fantasy purposes, have me a little bit more intrigued. I think Kenneth Walker, based on the last couple of years, he's had an abdominal injury, like I said, a couple lower extremity things. He's a running back. I mean, you're going to bake in the expectation it might miss a couple games here and there. But I'm not overly concerned about this, but I do wonder if it could impact what they're looking at as far as workload as a whole.
100%. And we have slid a little bit of work from Walker to Charbonnet in the last week or so, not because we think Walker is in danger of missing week 1 or anything like that, but to Stephania's point, Charbonnet can play, and he's been the one that's been out there more in camp there for sure. The Jayden Reed thing, they just called it like a sprained foot, and he's week to week. I don't know exactly what that means. He's out of the boot. We did put a doc on Jayden Reed, but we're starting to come off it a little bit here. Do you have any thoughts on the Jayden Reed sprained foot outlook?
Yeah, again, it's hard to know if this is, Green Bay medical typically a little bit on the conservative side, but not
Yeah.
in a bad way, in a good way. And again, long view of the season. So you do the boot because you don't want movement. When you have a foot sprain, like the biggest thing is a stable foot sprain or an unstable foot sprain. So stable meaning everything stays in position, there's no malalignment. Unstable, do you have enough ligament damage that you start to see a little shift? A lot of little bones in the foot, and the ligaments are integral to the architecture of that foot. Do you see any shift? If there's instability or something, depending on where it is, if it's midfoot injury, which makes you think of the term Lisfranc, that the range of outcomes there is tremendous.
Yeah.
And because if it's very mild and it's stable, it can be a couple weeks and they can be fine. If it's unstable and it's more significant, you can miss months.
Right.
So if they did all those things in the interest of like, this is small and we don't want it to get worse, so we're going to shut him down, we're going to mobilize it, let this thing get better, and we're going to call him week to week, then great. But if there's something a little more to it, or he's not progressing the way we'd like as it gets closer to week one, then we start getting more nervous.
Okay. Let's go to one where this one is a bit more controversial. Number 7 is Joe Mixon. We've had Joe Mixon like buried in the rankings for month plus now off of this foot injury, had not heard the greatest things about it. Now it's starting to become more public information. I feel like that Joe Mixon's foot is in real trouble with, who knows? People are calling it all kinds of weird, rare things that I've never heard of. So I don't want to get into the speculation rumor game here. The facts are Joe Mixon has not participated in a practice since literally last regular season. No OTAs, no mini camp, no training camp. There's no sign of him coming back whatsoever. Right before we came on this show, Stephania, there was actually the news breaking about Brian Robinson possibly getting cut or traded. He's not going to suit up for the game tonight. Texans are being talked about as a landing spot.
It's an obvious landing spot, right? We talked about it today as well.
Exactly. How worried are you about this Joe Mixon situation right now?
I'm worried. And I think it's, again, I appreciate that you stay away from the speculation because the Texans haven't given us anything to go on definitively. And so there is no reason to speculate, but you can certainly take what their actions are and what Joe Mixon's presence or absence really from the entire preseason tells you. And that's not good. If you told me initially that they were being cautious with him, given the fact that he'd had, remember he started off having it looked like this was a great move for him to Houston, looked fantastic. Then he had, unfortunately, there was a hip drop tackle, it was a tough injury, high ankle sprain. That was hard. I felt like he tried to push and come back a little quickly and he was a little stiff, but then he did start to get back. He looked really good going into last season. If you had told me, look, we're going to be smart given the foot and ankle injuries he's had in the past, so we're going to moderate his training camp activity, I would have said, fine. This is like crickets. That's very different feel because now you're getting to the point where it's like he's doing nothing. You're not going to take a guy and have zero acclimation. Acclimation is a big part of training camp. The NFL Health and Safety Group is in on it. If you're not there, not doing anything, unless you're rehabbing from a procedure where we know you're rehabbing from that, this is highly unusual. And if you go back to Joe Mixon's time in Cincinnati, he had an extensive midfoot injury back then that cost him a bunch of weeks in the season. That was the opposite side. So now you're talking about a running back who's had major injuries to both lower extremities, and something is problematic enough that it's keeping him out and completely away from any activity. And that just should tell you that it's not good. That's all you need to know.
I've just easy do not draft for me. Like I haven't taken him once over the last couple months, and I just don't take him. I don't take Quinshon Judkins. Like, somebody's going to take them and try to take the risk on. I just do not think the risk is worth the upside. Joe Mixon is a guy that has relied on volume more than efficiency in his career. Even if he does get back, which I'm skeptical of, but even if he does get back from this injury, how much volume can he take on when volume's been such a big part?
I got my eye on Woody all of a sudden.
Yes.
Late round flyer. We'll see if somebody like Brian Robinson comes into the mix. There's
Yeah.
Damian Pierce is there. Damian Pierce, who I loved when he first came out, but he struggled to stay healthy.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Woody Marks is somebody I've been taking late round in drafts.
Listen, if Woody Marks turns out to be the guy that you need this year, we won't be doing this show next year because I will be officially retired, never to step foot on YouTube again. So yes, I'm on the Woody Marks train. Okay. Last one to get to, number 8, J.K. Dobbins. It's like that meme. How does he keep getting away with this, right? And
modern medicine, man. I know.
Okay, I get modern medicine. This is out of control. ACL, LCL, and meniscus tears in 2021. That could end a running back's career. 2023 tears his Achilles. That has ended a lot of running backs' career. And then 2024, he sustains an MCL injury and ankle issues. I'm like, all right, now it's officially done. And he comes back later in the season. Now, the Chargers decided they'd rather have Najee Harris pre-July 4th fireworks incident. The Chargers decided they'd rather have Najee Harris than J.K. Dobbins, which I thought spoke volumes because I didn't think Najee is any kind of like special player. J.K. Dobbins would have been cheaper. They preferred Najee. That said, J.K. Dobbins is going to have some share of this backfield with R.J. Harvey, especially on pass downs. I think they trust him there. How is J.K. Dobbins doing this, Stephania? Can I have whatever drugs he is on? And do you think he's going to sustain for the whole year here with the Broncos?
I mean, it's hard not to root for him, right? Because he's been dealt such a nasty hand of cards in terms of lower extremity injuries. And if you remember when he was with the Ravens, when he had that injury, everybody was talking about how good he looked and he was coming back. I was a little bit nervous. I felt like he was a little bit stiff. This is going in the Wayback Machine, but you remember. But he was pushing so hard to get back. Do you remember? Yeah. He was adamant, like he really wanted to be back week 1. And this is the time where I really say, man, teams should really do what they can to. Why is week 1 such a big deal? It doesn't, if you're looking at longevity, week 1 doesn't matter. Really, week 1 is just a target of when the season starts. But he came back week 1, and then it ended up being a problem. He wasn't able to be as explosive. He ended up having another scope. I don't think people remember that, but he had to have a scope because he had stiffness in that knee. He was not himself. But after that, then he came back and he looked fantastic. And so I can't tell you exactly how. I mean, I think a lot of it is just, you get to the personality of the individual. But a lot of it is just this belief. There's a resiliency quotient that we don't fully understand, and the belief that I will come back and I will be better. Now, it's interesting, after he tore his Achilles, so he went out to LA and had his Achilles repair done by Dr. Neil Elatraj, who had done Aaron Rodgers. And so the two of them were out there rehabbing at the same time, under the same guidance, working at the same rehab facility. I think that did a lot for him. I think it did a lot in terms of motivating him to come back. It was an excellent facility. Sometimes a change of scene when you're doing that rehab is really good for you. And I think it was the right thing for him. And that may have helped, kind of boost him into that next chapter that he had with the Chargers. And I don't know what it is about Jim Harbaugh, but players love him. Love him, and he is like a big motivator. So I feel like Dobbins felt like he was given this huge second chance and really wanted to prove himself there, and he did. And he had a great year until the MCL injury, and I felt like that one he couldn't really help it. It's the risk of being a running back. I was a little surprised when they separated from him because I thought he showed what he could do, but they may have just seen the writing on the wall of like, okay, we kind of got lucky. We captured a little bit of lightning in that bottle to get us through this year, but he's had a lot of mileage on those legs in terms of the wear and tear, and it's time to move on. But I give him a lot of credit. He's still out there. I don't know how he does it. I would have retired. I don't know about you, but I would have been out.
I mean, he goes pretty high now, like around pick 100 for a guy who I would be shocked if makes it through the season, and maybe I'm selling him too short. I've sold him short before. I remember a few years ago, I tweeted a video of him not looking great. And I was like, man, it's sad, but it might be over, something for J.K. Dobbins. He found the tweet, quote tweeted me and like dunked on it. And now he plays for the Broncos. I'm a little worried he's going to find out where I live. I live here in the Denver area. But anyways,
maybe that's what everybody. Maybe that's the secret sauce. Is this motivation from the chip on the shoulder. I do think it really is a combination though of the way we approach rehab with some of these major injuries is a little bit different. And I think that it used to be the death knell of, first of all, it was ACLs years and years ago. And clearly that's like, now everybody's like, oh yeah, I tore my ACL this year. I tore my ACL. Like they compare notes on their ACLs. Achilles tears, like nobody came back from that.
Yeah.
And then do you remember Arian Foster? Like he had an Achilles tear. And I'm trying to think of who it was with the Colts who had one. But, there were a couple and they came back and it wasn't great, but they were back. They were back for a little bit. And then it was like, well, maybe they can come back. And there's nothing saying you can't come back as long as you don't try and rush it. The big thing with Achilles is you go too fast and you stretch out the repair, you're done. Like there's no coming back from it. So it's a very balanced rehab, but we've gotten better at saying, yes, you can come back from this. And we're setting guys up. And, the other thing is, this is what happens when you get me going on this stuff. You have to look at the incidence of Achilles tendon ruptures. Like we're seeing them.
Yeah.
This was not as common before. And one of the theories out there is that guys are so big and so strong that the muscle overloads what the tendon capacity is. And therefore, the tendons are failing at a higher rate than they used to. But because that's the case, and because it's not just necessarily old degenerative tendon, like crappy tissue that's failing, it's more this imbalance of muscle to tendon ratio, or, at least in this one theory bucket. Maybe these younger, healthier athletes can come back from tendon ruptures, patellar tendon rupture, Achilles tendon rupture, in different ways than athletes could have years ago when those were considered more degenerative injuries.
Yeah. There's also like I don't even want to get into this, but like these guys, like I'm playing tennis against these guys, and they're like 40 something years old like me, and and they play great, and they beat me, and they're in shape, and they have no injuries. I'm like, how are you doing this? They're like, I'm taking peptides, I'm taking testosterone, I'm getting performance enhancing drug losses out here playing recreational tennis, so I'm sure like the peptide revolution has maybe helped these guys also come back faster.
Yeah, be careful though. Don't play pickleball. That's where all the Achilles failures are happening.
Oh, I'm well aware.
Stick with tennis.
Last thing on J.K. Dobbins is the thing I was surprised about with this is when J.K. Dobbins signed with the Broncos, R.J. Harvey's ADP dipped, but not that much. Like he went down by like a half a round. People are not that scared of Dobbins. So I really like Harvey. His ADP is not like, you're not getting a discount though for the J.K. Dobbins signing, I guess is my point. So
and I think that's fair.
Yeah, me too. I just thought that the public would be like, oh, Dobbins is there, we can't take Harvey anymore, and we'd get a better deal. But market's too sharp now. A lot more sharper people out there that are not budging on RJ Harvey. All right, this was great. Always extremely informative to help get us ready to understand the range of outcomes on these guys as we get set for peak fantasy draft season. Stephania, appreciate the time so much. Tell the people where they can find you and all your work.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. As always, really appreciate the chance to chat about this stuff. I nerd out on this. This is what happens. People used to ask me if I root for injuries. I was like, no, of course not. I'm a physical therapist. Like we never root for injuries, but we know they're going to happen. And so it gives us a chance to talk about recovery and rehab and all that good stuff. But as you mentioned, the Fantasy Focus Football Podcast, we have a daily show. I will be on Mondays and Tuesdays for sure. Every week when the season begins, and then Sundays 10-1 Fantasy Football Now on ESPN2. Really is, I believe, the best show to get you ready for fantasy purposes for all the game action, because we have reporters at virtually every big game, so we're getting all the latest. I feed the reports like, this is what I want to know about so and so. Trying to get all the injury nuggets that we can before kickoff. So. Join us there starting week 1. It's coming up.
Yep, for sure. And obviously we've had Adam Schefter and Field Yates and Mike Clay on the show. Also, you guys can check them all out with Stephania on her shows there on the ESPN network. All right. That is going to do it for this look at injuries for the 2025 fantasy football season. For Stephania. For producer Ryan. Producer Luke. For everyone behind the scenes at ETR, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.